Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure, because today, Wayne reads Treasury of Literature, Carnivorous Plants. Always remember that as we go through these amazing adventures and read these outstanding stories, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link in order to follow along with the words. Now I believe Bumblebee will be perfect to join us for today's adventure. Now that Bumblebee's here, let's learn Treasury of Literature, Carnivorous Plants. A black fly hovers in the air over a strange-looking plant. Attracted by the smell, the fly lands on the flat reddish surface of the plant's leaves. It begins to crawl across. Suddenly, the leaf moves. Before the fly can get away, the two halves close around it. Two rows of teeth clamp together. All escape is cut off. The fly struggles to get free, but the trap only closes more tightly. Soon the fly is dead. In a few days there is nothing left but the hard parts of its body. This unlucky insect has become food for one of the world's most exotic plants, the Venus flytrap. The flytrap is one of about 450 species or kinds of carnivorous plants. Carnivorous means meat-eating. A plant that is carnivorous usually traps insects, spiders, and in some cases tiny animals like frogs and lice. Carnivorous plants have developed this way of feeding themselves in order to live and grow in a particular kind of environment. In order to survive, most plants must take in water and minerals from the soil. These elements are combined with carbon dioxide and energy from sunlight to make the food most plants need to grow. Nitrogen is one of the most important minerals needed for plant growth. For this reason, most plants grow in the best places where the soil is rich in nitrogen. But carnivorous plants grow in wet, low-lying swamps and marshes. Here the damp soil is nitrogen poor. Plants take in nitrogen through their roots cannot live in such soil. Carnivorous plants must stay alive by getting nitrogen and other minerals from another source. These plants get minerals from the bodies of the creatures they trap and eat. The special leaves of the carnivorous plant allow for them to catch and use this handy food source. How do these unusual plants work? First, they must lure or attract animals. Unlike a frog or a bird, a carnivorous plant cannot reach out and grab an insect. It must wait until the insect comes to it. For this reason, carnivorous plants have special ways of attracting insects and other animals. Some carnivorous plants give off sweet smell like that of nectar, which attracts insects such as flies, bees, and ants. Others give off the smell of decay, which flies and some other insects are equally attracted to. Many carnivorous plants have bright colors and patterns that serve as lures, and a whole group has leaves covered with sparkling droplets that attract insects with bright color and lights, as well as with sweet smell. Once an animal has been lured to the plant, it must be trapped. Generally, carnivorous plants have two main types of traps: active or moving traps, and passive or still traps. Plants with active traps, like those of the Venus flytrap and the water wheel, have parts that move quickly to trap insects that land on them. The moving parts may clamp together like jaws, or they may swing shut like a trap door. Passive traps do not depend on movement of their parts to trap animals. Some passive traps, like sundews, are sticky traps. Although some of them may move after they caught the insect, the actual trapping is done by a sticky substance on their leaves. This substance catches and holds the insect without need for movement. Other passive traps are the pitfall type. They are found in the pitcher plants. Inside the leaves of the pitcher plants are cleverly made of one-made tunnels into which insects are lured by sweet nectar. Once they're inside, the insects cannot go back out. All of these traps help to feed plants on which they grow. Usually many traps go on one plant. They all work together to catch, digest, and absorb the nutrient that the plant needs to survive. Active traps. Perhaps the most familiar of the carnivorous plant is the Venus flytrap. This plant is found only in the United States, in the swamps of North Carolina. The entire plant grows about a foot, 30 centimeters tall. In spring it has pretty white flowers blooming from the top of its stalks, but the most interesting part of the plant are its leaves. The flytrap's narrow green leaves grow in a circle around the plant's base. Each leaf blade opens into two halves, almost like a clamshell. The two halves, or lobes, are attached to a center rib. Each lobe averages about an inch in length. The inside surfaces of the lobes are usually reddish in color. Around the curved outer layers of each lobe is a stiff, pointed bristles called the cilia. On the inside surface of each lobe are the 3 trigger hairs. These strange leaves are the plant's traps. When the lobes are open in one position, the traps are set, ready for a meal. Sometimes you can see a spider be attracted by the leaves' red color and by the sweet smell of the nectar-like substance produced on its edges. As spiders or other animals crawl onto the leaf surface, it disturbs the trigger hairs. This is the signal for the lobes to move, but the trap must receive 2 signals in order to close. It will react only if 1 hair is touched twice or if 2 hairs are touched. This is the plant's way of making sure it has caught a live moving creature and not a piece of grass or leaf. Once the double signal has been given, the lobes close quickly around the spider. The cilia lock together to prevent escape. At this point, a very small spider or insect could still crawl out from between the cilia. The plant rejects such tiny animals because it would use more of its energy to digest them than it would gain from their bodies in food value. As the trap closes, a fluid begins to ooze out of the inner surface of the lobes and the spider is drowned. The fluid contains digestive enzymes, substances that change the spider's body material into a form that the plant can absorb as nutrients. As more and more enzymes flow into the trap, the spider's soft body parts gradually dissolve. In 8 to 10 days, the body parts of the animal have become nitrogen-rich liquid that is absorbed into the plant. The trap opens, and out falls the hard body parts that the plant could not digest. The trap is now set again. One trap will usually catch and digest an average of 3 meals before it withers and dies. Another carnivorous plant that uses an active trap, much like the Venus flytrap, is known as the water wheel plant. It is found in Europe, Australia, India, Japan, and Africa. This small, rootless plant floats just under the surface of quiet ponds and swamps. The whole plant is about 4 to 12 inches long. Its little white leaves, which bloom in the spring, show above the water surface. The traps are underwater. Each plant has a slender stern of leaves that are almost transparent. Groups of 8 leaves are arranged around the stem like spokes on a wheel. This is why the plant is called the water wheel. The water wheel's leaves are its traps. Each leaf is very tiny, less than 1/4 of an inch long. Such tiny traps can catch very small tiny creatures. The water wheel feeds on water fleas, on plankton, and on tiny larvae, insects in an early stage of development. The water wheel's leaves act just like underwater Venus flytraps. They have 2 lobes, rows of bristles, and trigger hairs inside each lobe. When an insect enters a trap, the halves snap shut in a fraction of a second. The water wheel then digests its meal and reopens to catch the next one. Both the Venus flytrap and the water wheel plant use a clamping movement to trap animals. But another type of carnivorous plant with an active trap, the bladderwort, moves in a different way. The bladderwort is a kind of trapdoor for catching its meals. Bladderworts are found in many parts of the world. Although some bladderworts grow on land, some grow in quiet ponds and swamps. Like the water wheel plants, they do not have roots. They float in strands or clumps just below the water surface. In summer, their tiny yellow or purple flowers bloom above the water. Growing all along the bladderwort's thin stems are its leaves. Each leaf is actually a little airbag or bladder. The bladders are very small. The biggest is only around 1/2 inch long. These tiny balloon-like leaves are the traps that the bladderwort uses to catch water fleas, insect larvae, and sometimes small tadpoles. At one end of each bladder are feathery hairs that serve as triggers. These hairs are arranged around an opening, across which is a tiny trap door. This door swings open one way only, inward. To trap insects, the bladder uses suction. When the door is closed, the bladder is empty. Its walls are limp and collapsed. Then an insect swims by and brushes against the trigger hairs. Suddenly, the bladder walls expand. This forces the trapdoor open and creates a sucking action. As the walls expand, the water rushes in, pulling the insect in with it. Then the trapdoor shuts, and the insect is caught inside the bladder. Immediately, the digestive enzymes inside the bladder go to work. If the insect is tiny, the bladder takes only 15 to 30 minutes to absorb the nitrogen and other minerals from its body. If the insect is larger, digestion may take up to 2 hours. Sometimes, a bladder gets hold of an insect or larva that is too large to fit inside it. Then it digests the meal bit by bit. A single bladder can catch and digest about 15 small creatures before it dies. Passive traps. Fly traps, water wheels, and bladderworts all use active traps to catch their food, but other carnivorous plants use passive traps, traps that do not depend on movement to capture insects. One group of plants, the sundews, uses a sticky trap. The small, round-leaf sundew provides a good example of the way a sticky trap works. This plant grows in many swampy areas of the world, including parts of the United States. The plant is small, about 3.5 inches long. It is often partly hidden among taller weeds and plants that grow around it. In the summer, The round leaf's tall center stems carry white leaves. The leaves of the sundew look bright red. They seem to be covered with sparkling drops of dew, but what looks like a pretty red dewdrop covered leaf is really a deadly trap for flies and other insects. The drew's leaves are covered with many little stalks of different heights. At the top of each stalk is a tiny gland or organ that produces a clear, sticky liquid. This liquid forms a droplet at the tip of the stalk. Usually the gland is reddish color, so the liquid on it appears to be red too. Flies and other insects are drawn to the sundew by the color and sparkling light, as well as by the attractive scent that the plant gives off. But when the fly lands on the sundew leaf, it is in trouble. Immediately, its feet are caught in the sticky liquid on top of the taller stalk. As the fly struggles to escape, more liquid flows out of the glands. Now the fly is trapped for good. The stalks around the fly bend towards its body, giving off more liquid. The whole leaf curls slightly into a cup body. Digestive enzymes work until the soft parts of the fly are dissolved and become absorbed into the leaf. After 4 or 5 days, the leaf and the stalks uncurl. Of all the carnivorous plants with passive traps, perhaps none are more exotic looking than the pitcher plants. These plants have special leaves that are hollow and can hold water, almost like a real jug or pitcher. The leaves are the plant's traps. Their structure and their appearance are so unusual that people have given them the fanciful nicknames, such as Huntman's Cup and Indian Dipper. There are about 80 different kinds of pitcher plants growing in the wetlands around the world. Many, like the North American pitcher plant, grow close to the ground in a circle around the center base. All the leaves of these plants are traps for catching insects. Other pitcher plants are found in tropical wetlands of Malaysia, Madagascar, and Sri Lanka. These plants have many brightly colored pitcher leaves growing on the vines. These tropical pitcher plants have ordinary green leaves, as well as brightly colored pitcher leaves. As the leaf grows, it swells to form a colorful jug. The top opens to form a leafy hood. In some pitcher plants, this hood is just a kind of frill above the pitcher's edges. In other words, it forms a flat roof above the whole opening. The leaves of various kinds of pitcher plants may differ in size, as well as in color, pattern, and shape. They can be from 2 inches to more than 2 feet tall. Some pitcher plants trap insects such as flies, beetles, and ants. The largest pitcher plants can also trap small frogs and mice. But whatever their size or outer appearance, all pitcher plants trap animals in basically the same way. A pitcher plant is passive. It does not need to move in order to trap an insect. Instead, its clever design becomes a prison for almost any insect that crawls into it. The leaf forms a kind of tube. At the top of this opening, usually brightly colored, the bottom part of the tube is shaped like a cup. Rainwater collects in this cup. In the pitcher plants that grow close to the ground, water is also drawn up from the soil to fill the cup. In most type of plants, the hood above the opening helps to keep too much rainwater from coming in. This hood always stays open. It never shuts to trap an insect, as some people believe. A sweet nectar is produced around the lip of the pitcher opening. Attracted by the nectar in the bright colors of the pitcher, an insect flies or crawls into the convenient lip. It begins to sift the nectar and soon crawls further into the opening, searching for more. When the insect moves into the tube of the pitcher, it is in trouble. The inside walls of the tube are slick and slippery as ice. The insect slips further down. There it finds its footing along the hairs that line the lower parts of the tube, but the hairs are all facing downward toward the pool of water below. Once the insect has crawled past them, it is impossible to get back up. The insect struggles, but it finally becomes exhausted and falls into the water below where it drowns. Now, digestive enzymes flow into the pool. As in other carnivorous plants, the softer parts of the insect's body are digested and absorbed into the plant. The hard parts of the body are collected at the bottom of the pitcher. Pitcher plants, like all carnivorous plants in this article, have found ways to thrive in places where most plants could not live. With help of their strange and beautiful leaves, they feed on the creatures that share their marshy environment. But as hardy as carnivorous plants are, today the lives of many of them are in danger. As people drain more and more marshland to make way for buildings and roads, the plants have fewer and fewer places to grow. They are becoming increasingly rare. Today, people are trying to grow some carnivorous plants in indoor greenhouses. In this way, they hope to preserve these fascinating and unusual plants, and to make sure that they do not disappear from the rest of our world. Oh wow, that was a lot to learn about plants, and the carnivorous ones too. What did you think, Bumblebee? I can see you getting a little scared, but we learned a lot. Thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you for another adventure here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye!